boy named Steve spent his whole childhood dreaming of becoming a miner, but every time he tried to help, an old man would angrily chase him away. Years passed, and Steve grew into a depressed adult who worked a dull job selling door handles. One afternoon, something as simple as his lunch reminded him of how much he once loved mining. That tiny spark pushed him to return to his childhood town, where he confronted the old man who still tried to drive him off. Steve dodged the man's attacks and finally slipped into the mines he had longed to explore his entire life. Inside the dark tunnels, Steve mined joyfully for hours until he uncovered two mysterious, glowing artifacts. When he joined them together, they opened a swirling portal into another dimension known as the Overworld. The moment he stepped inside, Steve fell in love. Night arrived every 20 minutes, and everything, even mountains and animals, was made of blocks. He could craft anything he imagined, even a house made entirely of wool. The overworld was peaceful by day, but deadly at night. Steve learned quickly to barricade himself inside to avoid the zombies that emerged after sundown. One morning, he encountered a snarling wolf. Giving it a bone instantly calmed it, and Steve adopted his new friend, naming him Dennis. Years passed as Steve and Dennis journeyed across the land, building fantastic structures and discovering new landscapes. Eventually, they found ancient ruins containing a chest missing a single block. Steve inserted the missing piece, restoring the ruins and activating a new portal. Together, Steve and Dennis stepped through and entered the netter harsh world without creativity, full of piglins, blinded by their obsession with gold. Their leader, Melgosa, was a ruthless sorceress searching for the Orb of Dominance. Steve's glowing artifact was exactly what she needed. She stole it, then began planning her conquest of the overworld. Steve and Dennis were thrown into a prison cell, but Dennis used his quick thinking to steal a guard's keys. After escaping, they retrieved the orb, and Steve ordered Dennis to take it to his house in the real world. Piglins recaptured Steve while others chased Dennis. But they couldn't survive in the overworld. Crossing dimensions turned them into zombies, forcing them to retreat. During the escape, Dennis dropped his collar just before he leaped through the portal. Alone in the real world, he hid the orb under Steve's bed. The artifact split when it hit the floor, sealing the portal and trapping Dennis permanently. Years later, in a small town in Idaho, a former arcade champion named Garrett owned a struggling retro store. His glory days from the 80s were long gone, and now he faced eviction. Desperate for money, he attended a storage auction, hoping to find something valuable to resell. When he heard a rare Atari Cosmos might be inside one of the units, he wrote a worthless check for $900 and won the lot. But opening the box revealed it was empty. Furious, Garrett destroyed the unit, failing to notice the broken orb pieces falling from the packaging. To make matters worse, his car broke down on the way home. Meanwhile, siblings Natalie and Henry were moving to town to honor their mother's dying wish. As they drove, they spotted Garrett yelling at his broken-down car. When they arrived, real estate agent Dawn handed them their new house keys and a welcome gift from the potato chip factory where Natalie would be working. Dawn also transported several animals. Her dream was to open a petting zoo. The next morning, Natalie made Henry their mother's signature pizza, hoping it would help him make friends at school. On the way, Henry wandered into Garrett's retro shop, fascinated by everything inside. Garrett advertised his mentorship program, and when Henry asked for life advice, Garrett demanded payments, so Henry gave him the pizza. Garrett offered confusing but heartfelt motivational words, reminding Henry that teamwork mattered. At school, Henry's first class was art. The teacher instructed the students to draw a banana and an orange, but Henry drew a banana with a jet. The class mocked him, and the teacher scolded him for not following directions. Determined to prove everyone wrong, Henry went to the science lab and built an actual jetpack, strapping it onto a skeleton. The launch worked at first, but the jetpack malfunctioned midair and crashed into the potato chip factory where Natalie worked, knocking the giant rooftop potato into the river. The vice principal threatened expulsion and demanded to meet Henry's guardian. Instead of calling Natalie, Henry called Garrett and offered him $26 to pretend to be his uncle. The vice principal was distracted by Garrett's pseudo-celebrity status and let Henry go. Back at the store, Henry threw away his notebook in frustration but noticed the glowing artifacts on Garrett's shelf. Curious, he asked what they were. Garrett read the paper that came with them, warning never to combine the pieces. Henry did it anyway. The orb lit up, and Garrett flipped the paper over to find another warning. Never search for the orbs. Treasure it is extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, Natalie panicked after discovering Henry was missing. Dawn helped her track his phone, revealing he was at the local mines. Garrett and Henry had already entered, unaware that Dennis was watching them from a distance. They found the glowing portal just as Natalie and Dawn arrived. Suddenly, the orb fired a beam of energy into the portal, pulling Henry inside. The others tried to grab him, but the energy was too strong and dragged the entire group into the overworld. The moment they arrived, they were stunned by the beauty of the blocky landscape. Garrett spotted a pink sheep and tried to talk to it, so the others followed him. In the nether, Melgosa sensed the orb's return and visited Steve, who had spent years imprisoned. She demanded he retrieve the orb or she would kill Dennis. showing him the lost collar as proof. Steve stole a sword and attempted to strike her, but she threatened Dennis again, forcing him to obey. Back in the overworld, Garrett kept trying to communicate with the sheep when night suddenly fell. A swarm of skeletons riding giant spiders ambushed the group, firing flaming arrows. They ran for their lives, but Garrett tripped into a hole. The others fled, and the skeletons aimed more arrows until one hit a spider, setting the forest ablaze. Henry bumped into a tree, knocking loose a small block. Realizing the tree could be mined, he punched it to gather more blocks and quickly built a structure for shelter accidentally, leaving the orb outside. Meanwhile, Garrett found a shovel in the hole and desperately dug while arrows rained from above. He escaped into a tunnel, sprinted through the darkness, and emerged only to be startled by a creeper. He punched it, causing it to flash and explode, launching him into the air. With zombies and skeletons chasing him, Garrett snatched the orb, but an arrow shattered part of it, making the portal vanish. He rushed to Henry's structure, but there was no door. Fighting off zombies, he was finally pulled inside by Henry through a last-second escape hole. Moments later, a creeper exploded, blowing out part of the wall. The group ran to the roof as the horde closed in. Suddenly, an axe sliced through a zombie. Steve appeared. Fighting with incredible skill, he slashed through the horde, eliminating most enemies within minutes. The remaining monsters burned away as sunrise returned. Steve explained they couldn't go home unless they recovered both pieces of the orb. The only place to find a replacement was the woodland mansion, a dangerous journey. He offered to help if they paid him with the orb, and the group agreed. In the Nether, Malgosa suspected Steve's betrayal. She summoned General Chungus and gave him a potion, allowing him to walk safely under sunlight. Back in the overworld, Steve brought the group to Midport Village to gather supplies. He revealed he had built most of the village himself and introduced them to the iron golem guarding the town. He even showed them how to cook chicken with lava. Garrett tried a piece too soon and burned his tongue. Natalie insisted they hurry, but Steve believed Henry needed time to build his creativity. Natalie snapped, calling his creativity pointless in the real world and saying it made him a loser at school. Hurt, Henry ran off. Steve showed Henry and Garrett various shop items, including weapons and armor. Garrett found a teleporting pearl and accidentally used it. Steve taught them crafting using patterns to create specific items. Garrett crafted heavy nunchucks while Henry made a slingshot like Tot. Garrett then demanded Steve take them to the treasure or lose the orb. Suddenly, Chungus and his piglin soldiers arrived atop flying ghasts. They burned the village and shot blasts that turned villagers into chickens. Steve prepared to fight, but Garrett attempted to act like a hero, accidentally knocking Steve unconscious. Chungus pummeled Garrett while Henry fired his slingshot at Pig. Dawn and Natalie grabbed farming tools and fought bravely. The iron golem eventually appeared and punched Chungus into the sky, but the ghasts ignited the town, forcing Steve to drag Henry and Garrett away. Natalie tried to follow, but flames blocked her path. Dawn promised they'd reunite at the mansion. Steve led Henry and Garrett to a tall building and gave them wingsuits. Garrett shoved Henry off, forcing him to activate the wings mid. Garrett followed, and Steve jumped onto Garrett's back, guiding him by pulling his hair. Ghasts and piglins chased them, firing shots that destroyed mountainsides. A piglin leaped onto Henry, nearly knocking him out of the sky, but he regained control. Ghasts blasted a hole in the rocks where piglins waited with a net. Garrett and Steve squeezed through just in time as piglins dumped lava behind them. Henry used a firework to blast a piglin into a ghast's mouth, causing a massive explosion, but the shockwave made him crash into the others. They plummeted toward the ground until Steve threw a water bucket beneath them, creating a lake to break their fall. In the woods, Steve shared Malgosa's past. She once dreamed of being a dancer, but piglins mocked her and her father felt ashamed. She eventually rejected creativity entirely and sought the orb to black out the sun and destroy the overworld. Steve promised to protect the orb but needed it to save Dennis. Meanwhile, Malgosa unleashed the Great Hog, who killed Chungus effortlessly. She ordered him to retrieve the orb. Dawn and Natalie reached a river but missed the last boat. Natalie mined a log to throw at the rower and missed. Now they had to cross through the forest. Night fell, zombies surrounded them, and they fought with farm tools until a wolf appeared. Dawn fed it a bone, and a collar with Dennis appeared. Realizing this was Steve's pet, she asked him to lead them to Steve. Garrett and Henry traveled through the redstone mines, where Garrett triggered a trap. Projectiles launched from the walls, one cube sending Garrett flying into a lever that opened a secret door, revealing a pile of diamonds. As Garrett collected them, Henry accused him of planning this all along. Then Steve smelled something horrible. The Great Hog was nearby. They escaped on a minecart, speeding through tunnels until the redstone power ran out. Surrounded by creepers, Henry fought them off, while Garrett pushed the cart back onto the track. The creepers exploded, collapsing the tunnel on the Great Hog and allowing the trio to escape. In the woods, Henry confronted Garrett for his selfishness. Garrett finally dropped his macho act and admitted he wasn't brave at all. He was scared, lost, and felt like a failure. Henry forgave him, and Garrett handed him the orb. They eventually reached the woodland mansion. Steve showed them a map of the 3 dangerous floors and explained they needed a plan. Steve and Garrett distracted the Vindicators by playing silly music while Henry snuck inside. He evaded guards at first, but they spotted him at the stairs and hurled axes. Henry hid in a room, rummaged through chests, and used materials to build a diamond axe. He soon found the replacement artifact. Suddenly, an Enderman appeared and hypnotized Henry with visions of his friends mocking him. When the illusion of Garrett burned his notebook, Henry snapped out of it. He attacked the Enderman, which teleported wildly. But Henry refused to give up and struck it repeatedly until it died, dropping a pearl. Henry mined through the floor to reach the fighting arena, where Steve and Garrett were trapped. Steve had been tied up, while Garrett was forced to battle the mansion's champion, tiny zombie riding a chicken. Together, the miniature pair hit Garrett repeatedly. Garrett managed to knock the zombie down, but it pretended to cry before sucker punching him. Steve broke free, headbutted the zombie, and threw it off the platform. Henry reunited with them, and the 3 friends fled the mansion only to be cornered by Malgosa and her army on ghasts. She used magic to rip the orb from Henry's bag and flew off while piglins planted dynamite on the bridge. Garrett threw Henry onto a ghast, knocking piglins into the abyss. Steve placed a slime block, bounced onto the ghast, and joined Henry. Before Garrett could escape, another ghast blocked him. He told Steve and Henry to go, then fought until the bridge exploded beneath him. The blast damaged the ghasts, sending Henry and Steve crashing to the ground. Later, Steve awoke inside a mushroom hut where Don and Natalie had rescued them. Dennis happily licked Steve's face. Natalie apologized to Henry, and they made up. Meanwhile, Malgosa placed the orb atop the nether portal. A powerful beam shot into the sky, covering the sun and allowing monsters to roam freely while piglins invaded the Overrun in the village. The heroes prepared for battle. They crafted Henry's best inventions. Natalie forged a diamond sword. Dawn used explosives to destroy skeletons and befriended more wolves. When piglins attacked, Henry activated an army of iron golems. The leader wore special boots, allowing it to stomp through piglin ranks with incredible speed. Malgosa unleashed a new great hog. The golem leader fought it fiercely. Steve donned diamond armor and charged at Malgoseba. She destroyed his armor with a single spell. He threw eggs, which hatched into chickens that bit her. Meanwhile, the golem leader fell, leaving the heroes desperate. Henry fired the pearl at the top of the portal and teleported instantly. The great hog nearly killed Natalie, but Dawn arrived with Dennis and a pack of wolves. Tackling the beast, the hog overpowered them and fired a beam at the portal, knocking Henry down.